Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest monologue. And this one will be about the perception economy. And it's all around us, but it's getting so ubiquitous that it's getting normalized, and few of us notice that it is now superseding the real economy. And that might sound a bit cryptic, but let me just illustrate the progression. The progression is from a world where we used to try and perceive reality, and information was to help people perceive realities that they may or may not have been aware of in a certain way. We have now moved to a world where we are trying to realize perception. So perception is preceding reality, and that's a problem. That's a problem because if you talk of like simple things like advertising and politics, advertising, someone might be telling you that certain soft drink, Coca-Cola, is very refreshing. An advertisement might be telling you it's very refreshing, and for whatever reason, there are people who find it refreshing. Some people don't like it, think it's bad for you, but it is refreshing, and they are just trying to persuade you that to go along with that perception. Um, Politics leaders, political aspirant to try and tell you, I'm a good guy, I'm going to do this and that for you, I'm pro environment, pro this, pro that. May or may not be true, but he's telling you, what he he's trying to introduce you to a reality that he will present to you if you elect him to office. Of course, that's before you elect him, so you have no way of telling until you elect him, and we know how that goes in many ways. But those are just examples. Now, if you look at global politics and what we hear in media, a few days ago, maybe a week ago, I heard that I heard on the media that Larry Ellison, this tech entrepreneur who's the founder of Oracle Software, suddenly overtook Elon Musk as the world's wealthiest man. So I was amazed because this obviously these are changes that entail colossal sums of money, and I was wondering, has he just invented something? What great amazing thing has he done? Has he discovered has he discovered a hitherto unknown gold mine or something? And it was just some index on modeling of futures of projections of what he owns and such. It was perceptions. There were certain indices and perceptions that suddenly added $80 billion to his net worth, and suddenly he's the world's richest man. He didn't do anything. It may have happened while he was asleep or something. But that's what we are getting to, and there examples abound in the commercial space. Be it suddenly Tesla is valued as the world's most valuable car company, more valuable than those that have manufactured millions of cars since the late 19th century. And it's perception because someone in the stock market says it's worth this. We go into cryptocurrencies. um, it's the most bizarre thing to me that cryptocurrencies, things that are imaginary perceptions, are used to purchase real things like land, like food or commodities, etc. It's absolutely baffling to me, and it's always been there. The change is now, I think, in the proportions. The the perception economy has grown bigger than the actual economy. For lack of better way of putting it, you can, if we read history, sort of maybe a century or maybe 60 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, certainly in my lifetime, there were days when the world's wealthiest people were the person who owns a factory that produces this, the person who owns oil wells that produce X million barrels per day, the person that manufactures this car, this machine, the person that has that's it was commodities based production. That's no longer the case. If you look at the list now, the producers are sort of somewhere down the tens. The industry production is done somewhere in the 10th, 11th richest. The top people are all the perception people. He's rich because he's he's projected to do this, that, the other. And this is all pretty remote from common people like you and me, but it's quite close. There are parts of it that are very close to us, and one of them is in the digital space. The digital space is a very important. I mean, digitization has changed our lives in ways you can't even begin to describe, and for the better, I may add. But there are ways in which it has introduced things that we wouldn't accept in the real economy. It has introduced things that can only be accepted in the perception economy. And look at the so-called services. And if we look at the service industry, go back to the history of mankind as early as it is said the oldest profession in the world is prostitution. May or may not be true. But coming forward, there are countries where it's legal. What is illegal, however, is the pimps, the people sort of enslave the sex workers and sell the sex workers services, take the money and only give the sex workers a portion of that money. They also they also give very violent retribution to those who might want to get out of this trap, if you will. So, in fact, human trafficking, a good chunk of human trafficking in the world is to serve the sex work industry, even today, not in faraway history. So that pimping is illegal because this guy is taking money for something he doesn't own or do, and he decides to give the person who actually does the service a portion of the earnings, and he takes a commission basically for nothing. So how is that different from what these taxi ride hailing apps do? Uber, for example. There are many. How is that different from pimping? They don't own the cars, they don't fuel the cars, they don't deliver the food or drive the passengers anywhere, but they take a portion of the money, a good portion of the money. I don't know about other countries, but I can tell you in Kenya, what they tempt customers by charging us really cheap prices. I mean, I've owned a car for some years and I drive. I sort of know what it costs to fuel and maintain a car, and the charges, it just doesn't add up to me. There's no way that is taking care of the car and earning the driver a reasonable profit. It's usury. It may be different in different countries, but Kenya, it's really bad. I can say for sure. And it started as a ride sharing thing where people would pick up passengers going the same direction. It might be on his way home and he'd take some people home. These days in Kenya, drivers are not even allowed to see that Mordecai has called for a cab and he's going a certain direction. So he can't choose to go in the direction of his home. That's how bad it is. So why is this acceptable? It's only acceptable because of the fact that it happens within the digital realm that somehow removes us from the reality and the exploitation that it is in reality. And if you look at some years ago, the founder of Uber, Travis Kalanick, was ousted from his position because of bad behavior that included bullying, sexual harassment, and misogyny. And it was the funniest thing to me that there are some people who, how did they see that as different from what the company does? That is where he got the inspiration to start this whole thing. It's no different from what the company does. There's no good part of it. This is just one of the dangers that we must sort of keep a foothold in the reality economy, if I can call it that, because that's where morals reside. Morals don't reside in machines and the digital realm. If we look at the environmental field, which is my professional field, um, the world is going through an environmental period of extreme environmental pollution and climate degradation at all levels, loss of species, etc. And the people doing this are corporations. They're the worst offenders are corporations, the military industrial complex, etc. But suddenly someone came up with some perception economy part of this, whereby instead of changing operations to make manufacturing more environmentally friendly, or to reduce emissions, to make it better, more environmentally sustainable, not net zero, because net zero is bullshit. You'll always have some emissions. um, Someone came up with this idea that someone can pollute as long as he pays some money to some broker somewhere who sells him some imaginary thing called carbon credits, and at the same time removes people from their land, displaces people from Kenyan and other African landscapes to make room for this imaginary thing. So a whole chain of crime is built from the perception economy. And when they get this paper, this certificate of carbon credits, that company can claim to be net zero, can claim to be environmentally friendly, can claim to be a green growth, green finance, green whatever green bullshit, can be greenwashed by the perception economy. But the the gases, greenhouse gases that they are spewing into the atmosphere continue unabated, or the liquid waste into a nearby river, if that's what it is, continues unabated. But now suddenly they are net zero. And you hear even entire nations are saying we are going to be net zero by 2050. I mean, in reality, such bullshit can't fly in reality. It's only the perception economy that allows us to bandy such statements around. Because even you and I, as individuals, cannot be net zero. Even now, as I'm speaking, I'm emitting carbon dioxide, and this whole thermodynamics, laws of thermodynamics, oxidation, etc., is the reason why organisms grow and grow old and die and decay after death. So the perception economy has created what can be described in science as the perpetual motion machine, which simply doesn't exist. Now, this perception economy, still on the environmental field, it's driven it's driven a whole wave of bullshit that has completely drowned out the real discussions around environment and sustainability, and the welfare of our earth. And this, if you look at the the COP, the COP meetings, which are supposed to be showing the way for the world, the way forward, there's nothing about environment being discussed there. They're discussing money, they're financial meetings. And since they're financial meetings, the loudest voices there are of capitalists: Gates, Bezos, um, Lebedev, Ellison, all these other billionaires. They're the ones. They actually go there, and they've they've received some quasi head of state kind of status, where instead of head of state speaking to fellow heads of state about sovereign issues, they're now talking to capitalists about financial issues. So they're looking for rescue from the very people who are destroying our environment. And and the saddest thing is that this perception turns the culprits, makes us so stupid as to perceive the culprits as saviors. And this is what I mean. They come and talk about, there's some talk about climate reparations. Climate reparations, I can tell you for free right now, that's bullshit. No one's gonna pay reparations. The West is not going to pay reparations to Africa for climate, the damage to the climate. They say they will, but they will not. The reason they say they will is that once I say, "Oh, I owe you," and they use some crazy sums. I owe you 800 trillion something. And you're suddenly like, wow, our leaders turn into people, into children with stars in their eyes. Wow, I'm going to be paid that. I can take 1 trillion for myself and develop the whole country. with the remaining money. No, it's not coming. It's to make you close your eyes and treat them and treat them as saviors rather than culprits. And it makes you pretend that they are your friends and partners, because this money is not coming. When you come to the low-lying nations that are threatened with inundation by seawater, these like Kiribati, Maldives, and Vanuatu, and these South Pacific islands, you hear them claiming we are owed these crazy amounts of money, and we want to be paid. If you are paid that money, are you going to fill sandbags with US dollars to hold back the sea? I mean, what's the money going to do vis-a-vis the sea inundating your respective nations? Are you going to pay the sea to move back, pay the tides to move back? So the money has completely destroyed this. And if you want to know that the entire global climate discourse is now composed of clowns, is when you go and see India described there as a poor nation. China is also described as a poor nation. It's described there as a developing poor nation. China. That's when you know these are conferences of clowns. And what they are talking about there is bullshit. This is the danger of the perception economy. There is someone writing in a paper somewhere that wants you to perceive China as a poor nation or India as a poor nation. That's how much harm it can do to us. And in Kenya, we are so steeped in this perception economy. I don't know if it's because of the imperial nature of the fact that our culture is so imperialist, that we are constantly perceiving ourselves as a nation as being a regional giant ahead of so and so and so and so. Just last week there was Africa Climate Summit in Addis Ababa, and a lot of Kenyans who travel to that because we do like these junkets. And many of the messages coming back were people in shock. Addis Ababa is so beautiful. They've got beautiful highways, infrastructure. People sharing photos of tree and street light lined boulevards in Addis. And I never knew. I mean, because these are all people who imagined that we are so far ahead of our neighboring nations. Kenyans, those who travel to Tanzania, come back saying, "Oh, look at the stadia, look at the Dar es Salaam bridge, look at this, look at that, look at that." And I'm always just laughing, although I'm laughing bitterly, because this is what the perception economy has done to us. Even our government has now started, and our government agencies have started substituting, instead of hiring an army of people to maybe clean up Nairobi or Nairobi River, they hire an army of people to go online and say Nairobi is clean. Instead of hiring an army of nurses and doctors to treat Kenyans, they hire an army of people to say that our healthcare sector is working. That's what it perception. So we start creating perception, and then we hope that some reality will somehow emerge from that perception. And this simply doesn't happen. And this is part of the reason why the digital world is there to our reality, how it enhance how we go about our real duties, how we perceive what is really there. It's not supposed to be a substitute for perception of the reality in our environment, the reality of our work, the reality of how good or bad our services are, the reality of how good or bad our social services or our immediate society is. We are meant to make that good in reality. Then we can perceive it as that. And it's the same thing even with tourism. We should conserve our environment and our wildlife because they're beautiful, they're part of our heritage. And once we've done that, the reality that will result from that will definitely be so beautiful that someone will want to come and see it. Someone who comes from a country with no elephants, comes from a place with no lions, maybe with no mountains or no beautiful forests and all that. We want to come and see it. But we can't start doing things, convincing someone to come and doing things to entertain them once they come. And this includes this comes in all our social discourse in Kenya. We should stop when there's poor governance and people are on the streets protesting poor governance. There's always those people who say, no, we shouldn't be protesting. Tourists won't want to come. If we are protesting the streets, tourists won't like our country. Excuse me. When there are problems with our social infrastructure, our physical infrastructure. I remember a journalist being berated for pointing out a leaking roof at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport because he's giving our country a bad image. Fix the roof, fix our systems. There is so much beauty that is inherent in our country, our society, and ourselves as individuals that we do not need to start looking for an alternate reality. We need to just embrace the one that is there with us, um, keep it and guard it and protect it as the precious thing that it is. Let's stop bandying things that are false and we know are false because there are so many people saying it. If you look at the environmental sector, if you look at carbon trading, biodiversity offsets, carbon offsets, this is all bullshit. But right now it's in UN documents, it's in state documents. Our Ministry of Environment has even been made Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. They're all doing carbon trading. They're Ivy League universities offering courses on carbon trading, yet this is a falsehood. That's how bad the perception economy can damage the human condition. I'm just using environment as an example because that's my professional field. But I'm sure you're able to find the perception economy and the bullshit in whatever field, in whatever country you live in. So let's keep a foothold in reality and let's perceive reality. Let's not start trying to realize perception because that's putting the cart before the horse.